Welcome to our next ThED talk. Normally these are done by Dr. Mark, but we thought that it might be useful to have someone from our neighborhood to give this next talk, which is all about our neighborhood profile. What indeed does our neighborhood look like in order so that we might make decisions about how we will reach our neighborhood for Jesus. So we're going to look at some 5 areas, and 5 areas that I figure there's a lot of things that we can discern about our neighborhood, but these 5 things might bear on a few things related to our church and our mission. First is ages. We might want to make age-targeted programming decisions. Marital status. We, of course, as the church, like to support families in marriage, parenting, broken marriages. We might want to discern about that. Income. How might we assist low-income households? Ethnic diversity. How might we be aware of culture and ethnicity in our programming? And finally, religious affiliation. Now, all this data I'm trying to pull from our Henderson survey area, but also Brantford and Ontario, so we can kind of compare and contrast. Indeed, we as a church we are located in the Henderson survey, but I recognize that not all of us live in the Henderson survey. So that's why it's useful to see Brantford as well and compare it with Ontario as a whole. So, age. We can see here in this chart that we have age broken down by the different categories. Now, you will glance at this and you'll notice that some of these are bold. These will indicate where we have slightly higher numbers than the other between Henderson and Brantford. And you might notice that indeed in our neighborhood, we have slightly higher in the 10 to 19, and then the 45 to 65, 45 and up categories. But the main insight I want to show here is that though our community does have slightly high numbers in these areas, we don't have significant difference indeed in terms of the entire province. We might imagine that our community is vastly more families, or vastly more seniors, or vastly more in this one category or other. But we're only off by a few percentage points in terms of Brantford as a whole, and indeed Ontario as a whole, which really reflects that the way I see it, our target to be an intergenerational community is still spot on. Even in this day and age, we have a variety of ages, and our missions field is ripe across a variety of life stages. So the next category, marital status. Indeed, again, it's a very similar picture whereby you can see clearly that we have a lot more married couples than those who have maybe never married, and indeed those who have been divorced or separated. The main thing I want to highlight from this is just to remind us that even though, yes, we have a large amount of folks who are married, and so going after those who are married and supporting those who are married is a good thing. We also have to remember that here and province-wide, there are people who are struggling with having been widowed, having had their spouse pass away, or those who are divorced and separated. The reality is still here in our area. Even though it might still be in the minority, it's useful for us to consider the diversity of experience in our neighborhood. The next is income. And now this, for those of us who are familiar with our neighborhood, will not necessarily find this surprising. Our Henderson area is relatively affluent in a city that is relatively not. But indeed, you can also see this in the low income numbers, where we have 8.8% in Henderson and 15.6% in Brantford. But the thing to also point out about this is that particularly with the low income numbers, it's not vastly different than Ontario either. It can be easy to assume that perhaps that our low income numbers are higher, but the numbers show that it's only slightly higher. The perception that maybe we are a city that is facing poverty more than others might be borne out by the fact that we are a small city. And so we see all stripes even more clearly because we're encountering it every day of our lives. And so the main thing to take from this is that, yes, indeed, there are people struggling. But just like anywhere else in the city, we want to be available for those who are needing support, and we should find ways to support them while also recognizing that in our area, yes, there may be not as many financial needs in our immediate neighborhood. Ethnic diversity. We have, as many of us would be aware, a not largely ethnically diverse city. Only in our city entirely, we have 9.9% who are visible minorities. Sorry, these numbers are for visible minorities. But in Ontario, of course, we have largely a large amount of visible minorities. But the thing that we want to stress here is that it's increasing. Our visible minority numbers are increased from 7.4 to 9.9 in the last 5 years, and the province as a whole is increasing in visible minorities. So it's worth us to consider, as our ethnic diversity increases, how might we be more culturally sensitive as we continue to minister in this area. And finally, the last thing to point out is religious affiliation. There's a lot of data here, but the main thing to point out is that our country is becoming increasingly non-religious. We'll notice that in 1991, 83% were Christian and 12.6% had no religious affiliation. Compared to now, in Ontario at least, 63% say they're Christian and 22% say no religious affiliation at all. The numbers of non-religious affiliation is increasing. We're becoming increasingly non-religious. The thing that we have to be aware of in terms of religious affiliation is that Canada is now a mission field. We can no longer sit back and assume that we are this Christian nation. We do have that foundation, but increasingly our own neighborhood is becoming the very mission field that we are seeking to reach. We don't need to go to another country, although that's a good thing. We don't need to go to a different city. That's a good thing as well. But even in our own city, there is a great amount of folks that don't know Jesus, that can experience the warm embrace and love of his gospel, of his good news, and the eternal life that comes with that. So hopefully this gives you a little bit more insight into what our neighborhood looks like, and talk to you guys soon.